Hi Kim, I want to know what is in-depth interviews.
In-depth interviews are a widely used qualitative research method where researchers engage in detailed conversation with participants to gather comprehensive information. This method is particularly effective in exploring complex or sensitive topics in greater depth than other research methods. Using follow-up questions is key to getting even more information from the participant. By asking more questions, the researcher can get a better understanding of what the participant is really thinking and feeling. This is especially helpful when studying things like illness, abuse, or discrimination, where there are a lot of complicated and personal feelings involved. In-depth interviews are also good when you want to learn about things that might be hard to measure, like emotion or belief. By talking to people, researchers can get a better sense of what is going on in their heads.
So how do I do an in-depth interview?
First, for all kinds of research, you need to find a research topic. But that research topic you think is suitable for using in-depth interviews. There are 6 steps for conducting an in-depth interview. First, researching the topic. Second, selecting and gathering information from the interviewees. Third, preparing questions. Fourth, setting up interviews. Fifth, conducting the interviews. Sixth, following up with the interviewees. The first 4 steps involve preparing for the interviews, while the 5th step is the actual interview. The last step is to ensure that enough information is gathered for the study, and to give participants a chance to review and comment on the study's findings. Let's talk about the first step and the interviewee selection in this video. The gathering information about the interviewees and the 3rd and the 4th step will be in the second video. The final step will be in the last video.
Is doing in-depth interviews simply asking questions? Can you tell me some good questions that I could ask?
Yes, when doing in-depth interviews, asking good questions is particularly important. But if you don't know much about what you are studying, how can you get information from the people you are interviewing?
So how do I get familiar with the research topic?
Of course, conducting a literature review is the essential thing you need to do. Through the literature review, you know what conclusion as well as controversy previous study has found. Moreover, a literature review allows you to gather crucial facts such as statistics, news story, and document which can serve as cue for exploring novel issues, probing deeper, and clarifying ambiguity with confidence in your interviews. For instance, if you want to study ethnic discrimination in Hong Kong, you can start by identifying keywords related to the topic, such as ethnic discrimination, Hong Kong, minority, racism, and prejudice. You can then search academic databases such as Google Scholar using these keywords. You can also search for reports and studies by NGOs and government agencies, such as Equal Opportunity Commission and the Society for Community Organizations. Once you have identified relevant sources, you can read the extract, introduction of each source to determine its relevance to the research question. Skimming the source can help you to identify the main findings, arguments, and ideas related to ethnic discrimination in Hong Kong. Taking notes on the relevant information from each source, such as the type of discrimination, the affected ethnic groups, the causes and consequences of discrimination, and the measure taken to combat discrimination, can help to analyze the sources and identify common themes and patterns related to ethnic discrimination in Hong Kong. Synthesizing the findings can help to draw preliminary conclusions about the extent and the impact of ethnic discrimination in Hong Kong, as well as effectiveness of the measure taken to combat it. However, sometimes you are interested in a topic that hasn't been studied much before. It can be challenging to find information in this situation. But don't worry, there are still a few things that you can do. One approach is to start by doing a literature review on related topics that has been studied before. This can help you identify relevant information and knowledge that you can apply to your research. Another approach is to brainstorm with your colleagues, classmates, friends, or anyone who has some idea about the topic.
That sounds nice. Okay, now I can start to draft questions.
No, not yet. Once you got your literature review, it's time to identify and select interviewees. When selecting interviewees, it is important to have a clear understanding of the research questions and the characteristics of the target populations. Through literature review and brainstorming, you can understand these factors and identify potential participants who can provide valuable information and insight. Then you can start sampling and selecting respondents. Let's take an example to see how sampling in in-depth interviews works. Since many previous studies have reported that Hong Kong's South Asian population often encounter discrimination in their everyday life and workplace, you can select a sample of Pakistanis, Indians, and Nepalese with different ages, gender, occupations, length of residence in Hong Kong. However, if the goal is to investigate a narrower topic such as ethnic discrimination in Hong Kong for the Nepalese, specific sampling strategies should be considered. Some such strategies include selecting participants based on their experiences with discrimination, their cultural background, or their job type. It is important to understand your research problem thoroughly to choose the most appropriate strategy or combination thereof. In terms of having specific purposes in selecting respondents, sampling strategies can be divided into two broad types: convenience and purposive sampling. Convenience sampling involves selecting participants who are easily accessible and available to participate in the study. While this method may be quicker and more cost-effective, it may not provide the same level of diversity and representativeness as purposive sampling. Purposive sampling involves deliberately selecting participants who have specific characteristics or experiences that are relevant to the research question. Once the relevant characteristics have been identified by the literature review, you can develop selection criteria to guide the sampling process. Some researchers divide it into several subtypes. Key informant sampling deliberately select interviewees who may or may not be South Asian Hong Kong people, but have profound knowledge and information about the ethnic discrimination affairs in Hong Kong. For example, you can interview the chairperson of the Equal Opportunity Commission and frontline social worker of an NGO helping South Asian Hong Kong people to deal with their everyday life. Typical case sampling involves selecting South Asian respondents who have common characteristics, standards, or norms that we believe are commonly held by the general South Asian population in Hong Kong. Another method is unique case sampling, which involves selecting respondents whose characteristics are vastly different from the typical case ones. However, their position on the issue of interest may or may not be hugely different from the typical ones. For example, in Hong Kong, many South Asians have once Chinese parents. It is worth investigating whether these South Asians have similar experiences or opinions as those with both non-Chinese parents. Deviant case sampling differs greatly from typical case sampling. Deviant cases refer to individuals who hold extreme position on issues and exhibit unusual manifestation of the phenomenon, such as outstanding success or notable failure. A unique case may or may not differ from a typical case in terms of outcome, But a deviant case is very different from a typical case. By understanding the factor that cause your respondent to deviate from other South Asian people, you can gain a better and deeper understanding of the dynamics of ethnic discrimination in Hong Kong. For instance, in your literature review, you find that most Hong Kong South Asian population regard Hong Kong having ethnic discrimination problem. You may want to scrutinize the issue deeply by selecting the few South Asians who don't think having ethnic discrimination in Hong Kong. Regarding the general composition of the sample, if you simply want to study how Hong Kong Pakistanis elites experience and opinions about ethnic discrimination in Hong Kong, we may use homogeneous sampling. However, if you want to study whether Pakistani people with different social class background have dissimilar experiences and opinions about ethnic discrimination in Hong Kong, you better use maximum variation sampling. In homogeneous sampling, the goal is to gain a deep understanding of the phenomenon. Rather than selecting cases that are different, you choose cases that are similar as possible. The approach is often used for subgroup of people who share the same situation. For example, in our previous scenario, you could select Pakistani informants from Hong Kong Professional Association, such as members of the Council of Hong Kong Professional Association. It is expected that these respondents will share similar experiences and opinions about ethnic discrimination due to their similar professional positions. In contrast, maximum variation sampling selects cases that represent the entire spectrum of a phenomenon. This means that we study not only typical cases, but also unique and deviant cases. However, these cases may not exhaust all possible scenarios. To produce maximum variation sampling, we need to determine the number of potential mediating variables and use them as criteria for case selection. For example, social class is a crucial factor that affects people's ethnic discrimination experiences and opinions. To represent the entire spectrum, we must determine the number of social classes. Let's say we decided to have 3 social class categories: upper, middle, and lower classes. We may also consider gender and important factors. By cross-tabulating these 2 mediating factors, we can create 6 sampling subtypes that represent the maximum variation of the phenomenon, and you need to recruit participants into all 6 subtypes. So far, we have talked about how to formulate sampling strategies before undertaking the actual interviews. However, there are also techniques that can be used after completing several interviews. In particular, there are several techniques that can be employed to refine the sampling strategy and to gain a better understanding of the phenomenon being studied. When researching a sensitive topic, it can be difficult to determine the typical characteristic of your target population. For instance, if you wish to investigate how ethnic discrimination influences the likelihood of Hong Kong South Asian youth committing crimes, you may be unaware of relevant characteristics to establish your selection criteria. Even with criteria such as age and gender, you may still struggle to locate sufficient number of informants. In such cases, snowball sampling can be beneficial. This approach entails identifying potential participants through referrals from the current participants. It is useful for locating individuals who might be challenging to find through other methods. In addition to snowball sampling, there are other techniques that researchers can use to refine their sampling strategy and gain a better understanding of the phenomenon being studied. Confirming case sampling involves selecting cases that have similar characteristics to produce the outcome as indicated by the already completed interview cases. it aims at validating your initial findings from previous interviews and help you elaborate and deepen your understanding through testing the subsequent cases. In contrast, this confirming case sampling involves deliberately selecting cases that invalidate your initial finding. This technique is to identify exceptions or outliers that challenge the assumptions of your research, so that you can gain a more comprehensive understanding of the phenomenon being studied and avoid overgeneralization. For example, if your initial finding about ethnic discrimination in the workplace suggests that age is positively related to ethnic discrimination, if you use confirming case sampling, you may deliberately select all interviewees who face discrimination. But if you use this confirming case sampling, you may deliberately select interviewees who face discrimination despite being young. Here is a graphic summary of different sampling techniques. We can classify them according to when the sampling occurs and the purpose of the technique.